The night Greenville swallowed the streets whole, but one knock on a quiet door was about to drag a secret into the light. Before we dive in, hit subscribe and drop a like. It keeps these stories coming. Lieutenant Miller stood on Peter Jones's porch like a man carrying a weight he didn't yet know how to set down. Fog wrapped around him, heavy and low, as if the whole town was holding its breath. When Jones opened the door, the lieutenant stepped inside without a word, his silence doing all the talking. Jones watched him carefully. Miller wasn't the type to break, not easily, not ever, but tonight his jaw was tight, his eyes darker than the weather outside. "I need your help, Peter," Miller finally said, dropping into the nearest chair as though he'd been walking for hours. Jones didn't flinch. He'd seen his friend rattled maybe 3 times in all the years they'd known each other. This made 4. "Say it," Jones replied, leaning forward. Miller exhaled sharply. "Simon Fletcher, local teacher. Everyone liked him, honest man, clean record, no enemies, or so we thought. He was found dead in his office. Looked natural. Head down on his desk like he fell asleep." Jones studied him. If this were simple, Miller wouldn't be here at midnight. "The coroner ran extra tests this morning," Miller continued. "Simon was poisoned, something rare, something almost impossible to detect. That changed everything. No signs of a struggle," Miller added. "No bottle, no trace. Whoever did this was smart, too smart." Jones leaned back, connecting dots that weren't dots yet. "A rare poison and a clean scene. That's not anger, that's planning." Miller nodded slowly. "And we have nothing to go on." "Then we start where every lie begins," Jones said. "At home." The next morning, Jones walked up the path to Simon Fletcher's house. When the door opened, Emily Fletcher appeared, frail, exhausted, but forcing dignity into every breath. Her eyes were red, her voice thin. "Mrs. Fletcher," Jones said softly, "I'm sorry, but I need to understand what happened." She led him inside. The living room was still dim, full of memories that didn't know they were memories yet. "Simon was a good man," she whispered. "He worked hard, he cared about his students. I can't imagine who would ever hate him." Jones listened, watching her reactions, searching for cracks. No conflicts, no threats. No one who held a grudge. Emily shook her head, but grief blurred certainty. Nothing that could lead to this. "May I look around?" he asked. She hesitated, then nodded. Jones entered Simon's study, tidy, organized, too clean for a man with a chaotic end. As he sifted through papers, one detail caught him off guard: money. More than a teacher's salary should ever allow. Far more. Interesting. When Jones returned to the living room, Emily looked at him with weary hope. He hated what he had to ask. "Were you aware your husband had significant savings?" Her shock was genuine. "No, Simon never said anything." Which meant either Simon was hiding something or someone else was. Jones stepped outside into the cold morning air, knowing one thing for certain. This wasn't the death of a simple schoolteacher. This was the first thread of something larger. The school where Simon Fletcher had spent most of his life looked oddly hollow without him. Corridors were quiet, lockers shut, the faint smell of chalk hanging in the air like a memory that refused to leave. Jones walked into the staff room, and conversations dropped to whispers. Grief, curiosity, and fear mixed in one tense silence. The first to speak with him was Mr. Mayer, the history teacher, a man with kind eyes and glasses that never quite sat straight on his nose. "Simon was what you'd call a model teacher," Mayer said after Jones introduced himself. "Strict, yes, demanding, absolutely, but fair. The kids complained sometimes, sure, but they always knew he wanted the best for them." "No one took his strictness personally?" Jones asked. "No students who hated him enough to hold a grudge," Mayer frowned. "Teenagers complain about everything. Tough homework, bad grades, too many rules, but something serious. No, not that I ever saw." Jones thanked him and moved on. Across the room, Miss Avery sat with a stack of notebooks in front of her. The English teacher looked up warily as Jones approached. "Miss Avery, I'm Peter Jones," he said. "I'm trying to understand if anyone might have wished Simon harm." She hesitated. "Simon was precise," she said slowly. "He believed discipline was as important as knowledge." If a student tried to cheat or slack off, he wouldn't let it slide. Some found him harsh. Many came back later to thank him. But not all, Jones pressed. Avery's gaze drifted away. A few months ago, a father came in furious, she admitted. His son was failing. Simon insisted on extra lessons and strict rules. The man threatened to file a complaint, made a scene in the hallway. I don't know his name, but it's in the visitor log. There it was, not proof but a direction. Later, in the vice principal's office, Mr. Bennett spoke like a man defending a brand. Fletcher was one of our best, Bennett said firmly. No scandals, no shortcuts. I never saw him involved in anything questionable. Money, he scoffed when Jones brought it up. He was almost painfully honest. If there's talk of suspicious finances, I'd be careful with such rumors. Rumors, Jones thought, that came with hard numbers in neat folders back at the house. When he left the school, the sky was already darkening. Greenville folded back into its usual gray, as if trying to convince itself nothing unusual had happened. That night in his study, Jones spread the documents from Fletcher's home across his desk. Savings that didn't match a modest salary. A quiet man with no enemies, poisoned with a rare substance, sitting on money he shouldn't have had. "Who were you really, Simon?" Jones murmured. Outside, fog slid down the streetlights like a curtain. Inside, one thought settled in Jones's mind like a stone. This wasn't just about a dead teacher. It was about whatever secret had started to pay him. The morning drizzle tapped softly against Jones's window as he prepared for another round of digging. He had planned to revisit Simon Fletcher's house, armed with fresh questions and sharper instincts. But as he reached for his coat, a quiet knock interrupted him. Standing on his porch was a woman in a soaked black coat, her hair plastered to her cheeks, eyes red from worry and rain. "I'm Sarah Middleton," she said with a trembling voice. "Simon's sister. Please, may I come in?" Jones led her inside, guiding her toward the warm light of the living room. She sat carefully, like someone choosing every move on thin ice. "No one knows I'm here," she whispered, "and I want it to stay that way." Jones nodded. "Then tell me what no one else should hear." Her hands twisted together, nervous and pale. Simon had a mistress. It wasn't what Jones expected, but it fit too cleanly with the unexplained money. "Who is she?" "Amanda Wyndham," Sarah said, voice cracking. "His first love, someone who married into wealth. They reconnected when Simon began tutoring her stepson. Amanda insisted on seeing him again. She pressured him, and she was married to a man who doesn't tolerate betrayal." Jones's mind sharpened. A jealous husband, a secret affair, hidden money, motive wrapped neatly with danger. "You believe her husband might have discovered the affair?" he asked. Sarah nodded. "He's powerful, jealous, controlling, and if he knew," her voice dropped to a whisper, "he wouldn't confront Simon. He'd hire someone quiet." Jones considered the idea carefully. Amanda's husband had influence, resources, and a reputation for getting what he wanted. Poison fit that type of man perfectly, but Sarah wasn't finished. "There's more," she said. "Simon also had trouble with a student, Eddie Hilton. Their arguments were intense, but Simon said the boy was troubled. And an old friend of his, Mason Kendrick. They fought years ago and never spoke again. I don't know whether any of this matters, but Simon mentioned both shortly before he died." It mattered. Everything mattered. Jones escorted her to the door, promising discretion. As she stepped back into the rain, the detective adjusted his plans. Before he dealt with wealthy husbands and dangerous secrets, he needed to eliminate the simplest leads. He headed to the Hilton's home. The Hilton house leaned slightly to one side, worn by time and weather. Eddie Hilton, tall and thin, emerged from his room looking wary but curious. "Eddie," Jones began, "I'm not here to accuse you. I'm here to understand." The boy surprised him. His voice was steady, honest, far more honest than most adults Jones had interviewed. "Mr. Fletcher pushed me hard," Eddie said. "Harder than anyone, but he cared. I didn't see it then. I thought he hated me, but he was the only teacher who didn't give up on me." Regret flickered across the boy's face, raw and real. "I argued with him. I said terrible things, but I never wanted him hurt. Never, Jones believed him. Eddie wasn't a killer, just a kid caught between anger and circumstance. Back outside, the sky darkened again. Greenville seemed determined to stay gloomy until the truth surfaced. Jones walked home slowly, replaying every detail. A mistress, a jealous husband, sudden money, a troubled student, an estranged friend. The picture wasn't forming yet, but the shadows around it were getting sharper. And somewhere inside those shadows, a murderer was waiting. Jones spent the evening reconstructing every thread that tied back to Simon Fletcher. Yet the more he untangled, the more tangled it all became. By the time Lieutenant Miller arrived on his porch, the detective already knew. They had to confront the biggest shadow in the room, Amanda Wyndham's husband. They sat outside, the sun setting behind the rooftops, the air turning cool. Miller smoked nervously, flicking ash over the railing. "So what's our angle?" he asked. Jones stared into the distance. Jealous husband, hidden money, secret affair, and a poison that doesn't show up in standard tests. We need to verify Wyndham's alibi. Miller raised an eyebrow. "You expecting him to confess just because you ask?" "People reveal more than they realize," Jones said. "Especially men with too much power and too much pride." They drove to Wyndham's office, a towering building with polished glass and sharp lines that mirrored its owner's personality. Inside, the secretary guided them to a heavy oak door. Behind it sat Mr. Wyndham himself, rigid posture, sharp gaze, controlled expression. Jones didn't bother with pleasantries. "Mr. Wyndham, we're investigating the death of Simon Fletcher. We need to know where you were on the night he was poisoned." Wyndham's eyes narrowed just slightly, the only crack in his mask. "Is this a joke, detective? Simon Fletcher was my son's teacher, nothing more." Jones kept his tone calm. "Rumor suggests otherwise, and you're a man known to act decisively." "For God's sake," Wyndham snapped. "Why would I be jealous of a schoolteacher?" He leaned back, trying to look amused, but tension ran through his jaw like a wire ready to snap. "I advise you to find a real suspect," he added coldly, "and stop wasting my time." Outside the office, Miller let out a low whistle. "He's hiding something." "Maybe," Jones replied, "but not necessarily murder. Wyndham might have been cruel, arrogant, and controlling, but poison felt too poetic for a man who preferred to crush things directly." Jones shifted focus. "We need answers from someone with less money and fewer lawyers," he said. "Let's dig into Simon's finances again." Mrs. Fletcher allowed them into her late husband's office once more, though her eyes were hollow with grief and exhaustion. "All his letters and bank documents are in that box," she said quietly. "Take what you need." Back at Jones's home, he and Miller spread everything across the table: bills, receipts, letters, statements. Then Jones spotted it, a pattern. Every 2 weeks, Simon transferred a substantial amount of money to one name, Mason Kendrick. The same Mason Simon had stopped speaking to after a harsh argument years earlier. Miller leaned over Jones's shoulder. "Personal loans." "Really? Convenient wording," Jones muttered. "Too convenient." They kept digging. In a hidden envelope, Jones found something that made his heart beat faster, an old notebook, worn but intact. Inside, handwritten notes, detailed and precise. Meetings, dates, threats. Mason demanding money in exchange for silence. Silence about the affair with Amanda. And then, pages that chilled Jones more than the blackmail. Simon had discovered something illegal, something involving Mason. Government contracts, strange transfers, shell accounts. Jones sat back. Mason wasn't just blackmailing him, he was laundering money. And Simon found proof. Miller's eyes widened. "So when Simon stopped paying, he became a liability," Jones finished. "Poison wasn't a crime of passion, it was a crime of strategy. A way to erase a problem quietly before it exploded." Suddenly, the calm and controlled picture snapped into focus. It wasn't the jealous husband. It wasn't the troubled student. It wasn't some random grudge. It was a man whose entire criminal operation stood on the edge of collapse. Mason Kendrick had the motive. He had the fear. He had the intelligence to use a rare, nearly undetectable poison. And now Jones realized he also had the spotlight. The next step was clear. Confront Mason Kendrick directly and push until the cracks broke open. When the sun finally dipped behind the rooftops, Jones and Miller sat in tense silence on the detective's porch. The weight of the case pressed harder than the humid evening air. Leaves rustled, cicadas buzzed, but neither man spoke for a long while. They didn't need to. The truth was forming, and it pointed in one direction. Mason Kendrick, Miller finally said, exhaling smoke. Blackmail, secret payments, government money flowing into places it shouldn't. He fits too well. Jones nodded slowly. Too well is what worries me. Men like Mason don't slip easily. If he planned this, he covered his tracks. Then we push him, Miller replied, until he breaks. Jones stood, grabbed his coat, and motioned toward the car. Let's go get what he didn't plan for. Mason Kendrick's house stood on a quiet street, elegant but not ostentatious, exactly the kind of place a man with hidden income would choose. When Mason opened the door, he looked annoyed but not surprised. "You two again," he said sharply. "What is it now?" Jones stepped inside without waiting for permission. "We need to clear up some inconsistencies in your financial relationship with Simon Fletcher." Mason forced a smile. "There was nothing inconsistent. I lent him money years ago. He was paying it back." "Regularly," Jones said. "Too regularly, and far too much for a man doing well on a teacher's salary." Mason shrugged, but his eyes flickered. "People make sacrifices." Jones placed a folder on the table: bank transfers, signatures, dates. Another folder: notes from Simon's hidden notebook. A third: analysis of government contracts linking back to shell companies. Mason's confidence wavered for the first time. "What exactly are you implying?" he asked. Jones leaned forward. "You weren't loaning him anything. You were blackmailing him. You found out about his affair with Amanda Wyndham and squeezed him dry." Miller folded his arms, adding pressure. "But Simon stopped paying you because he uncovered your real business. Laundering federal contract money." Silence. Deep, cold silence. Finally, Mason laughed, short and bitter. "Do you even hear yourselves? This is nonsense." Jones didn't blink. "Simon planned to expose you. He documented everything. He kept receipts, he kept dates, he kept proof." Mason's jaw tightened. His voice cracked ever so slightly when he spoke. He should have stayed out of things that didn't concern him. Miller shot a quick look at Jones. There it was. Jones pressed harder. "Where did you get the poison?" Mason's face drained of color. His fingers trembled, barely noticeable, but enough. "You knew a scandal would destroy you. Prison, bankruptcy, every connection gone. So you silenced him." For a moment, Mason Kendrick looked like a man cornered from every direction, his lies collapsing, his control slipping. He opened his mouth to argue, then closed it. The silence stretched until it snapped. "Fine," he muttered. "Yes, I did it." Miller straightened instantly. Jones remained still, watching the man crumble. "He forced my hand," Mason continued, his voice bitter. "I couldn't let him talk. He had everything. If he went to the authorities, I'd lose everything I built." "You already have," Jones said quietly. As Miller called for the arrest team, Mason stared at the floor. No anger, no bravado, just the hollow realization that his entire empire had collapsed in a single evening. Driving home, Miller exhaled deeply. "That's it then. Case closed." Jones didn't answer. The case was solved, but the damage left behind, lies, betrayal, a family shattered, would echo for years. Some cases end in justice. Others end in truth. This one, Jones thought, ended in both, just not the kind anyone hoped for. The night felt heavier than usual when Jones returned home after Mason Kendrick's arrest. The rain had started again, tapping lightly against the windows as he sank into his chair. The weight of the case still pressed against him despite the confession. A solved crime didn't erase the damage it left behind. He lit the lamp on his desk and went back through the documents, not because he doubted the outcome, but because something in him resisted closure. Simon Fletcher hadn't just been a victim of a crime. He had been a man trying to fix his mistakes, trying to climb out of a trap he never should have fallen into. Jones rubbed his eyes, feeling the fatigue settle into his bones. A soft knock broke the silence. When he opened the door, Amanda Wyndham stood beneath the porch light. Elegant, composed, but with a tension in her shoulders that betrayed the storm inside her. Behind Jones, Miller, who had stayed late to debrief, froze for a moment at the sight of her. "Mr. Jones," Amanda began softly, "may I speak with you?" He stepped aside, letting her in. She walked to the center of the room with the kind of presence that drew every eye without a single word. "I've made a decision," she said, clasping her hands. "I can't stay married to a man I never loved. I'm filing for divorce." Miller didn't hide his surprise. Jones kept his face neutral, waiting. Amanda took a breath. "And there's something more. The money I sent to Simon, I'm giving it all to his wife and children. They deserve stability after what happened because of me." Jones studied her for a long moment. "You understand this will force you to confront the truth with Mrs. Fletcher." A shadow crossed Amanda's expression, but she nodded. "I know." Half an hour later, the three of them stood at Emily Fletcher's doorstep. Amanda hesitated only a moment before knocking. Emily opened the door slowly. Her grief had softened into a quiet endurance, the kind that came from days of tears and nights without sleep. "Amanda," she whispered, confused. Amanda stepped forward. "Mrs. Fletcher, I came to tell you the truth. Simon and we had a relationship. I didn't mean to hurt you, but I did, and I am so deeply sorry." Emily's breath caught. She didn't speak. She simply listened, her eyes filling with a pain she managed to hold back with remarkable strength. "He loved you," Amanda continued, voice trembling. "He spoke of you with respect, with gratitude. Whatever happened between us, you were the woman he built his life with." For a moment, the only sound was rain tapping against the roof. Finally, Emily nodded, slow, controlled, dignified. "Thank you for telling me." Amanda stepped back. "I will support your family financially. I know it cannot fix what happened, but I hope it eases the road ahead." Emily said nothing more. She simply closed her eyes, breathed deeply, and nodded once again. Miller guided Amanda gently toward the car. She accepted, offering him a faint, grateful smile. When the two of them drove away, Jones remained on the porch, watching the headlights disappear down the wet street. Something eased in him, a small, subtle shift. Not happiness, not satisfaction, but closure. The case had been brutal, messy, soaked in betrayal and desperation. But in the end, the truth had surfaced. And sometimes that was the best outcome a detective could hope for. Jones stepped back inside, letting the door click softly behind him. In Greenville, secrets rarely stayed buried for long. The next morning arrived quietly, as if Greenville itself wanted a moment to breathe after the storm of revelations. The sky hung low, painted in muted shades of gray, and the drizzle had returned, soft, steady, unhurried. Jones sat at his breakfast table, hands wrapped around a warm mug of tea, staring absently at the steam curling upward. He had expected the end of the case to bring relief. Instead, it left him with a strange emptiness, the kind that follows after wrestling with darkness and finally letting go of the last thread. A knock sounded on the door. Jones opened it to find Lieutenant Miller standing there, looking more rested than usual. Behind him, Amanda Wyndham, dressed simply but gracefully. She offered Jones a small, sincere smile before turning her attention to Miller. Clearly, the two had spent the morning together. Miller cleared his throat. "Thought we'd stop by. Amanda wanted to thank you." Amanda stepped forward. "I owe you more than gratitude, Mr. Jones. Without you, Simon's story would have stayed buried. His children will know the truth. His wife will be supported. Justice was done." Jones nodded politely, but there was a warmth behind his eyes that answered more honestly than words. Miller chimed in with a grin. "And well, seems like this whole thing brought people together in unexpected ways." Amanda gave him a quick but gentle nudge. "Lieutenant," but the hint of blush in her cheeks said enough. Jones smirked. "Life has a strange sense of timing." Miller didn't deny it. Amanda extended her hand. "If you ever need anything, Mr. Jones, anything, you know where to find me." Jones shook it, firm and sincere. "And if you ever need clarity or answers again," he replied softly, "you know where to find me." With that, Miller escorted her down the walkway toward his car. Jones watched them go, feeling something rare settle in his chest, a quiet, optimistic weight. Hope maybe, renewal even. He returned to his living room where the last remnants of the case still lay on his desk. Old notebooks, bank slips, statements, all the heavy proof of a life pulled apart in secrecy. One by one, he closed each folder. The case of Simon Fletcher had begun with darkness and deception, but it ended with truth, justice, and, unexpectedly, new beginnings for the people left behind. Jones placed the final folder in his cabinet, shut the drawer, and let the room fall into silence. Outside, the drizzle slowed to a soft mist that glimmered over the quiet neighborhood. Greenville wasn't perfect. It never would be. But today, at least, it felt a little lighter. Jones reached for his coat, stepped outside, and breathed in the cool, damp air. A new day, a clean slate, and perhaps, just perhaps, the promise of something better ahead. Thanks for watching. If the story kept you on edge, hit subscribe and like to stay with us. Now tell me in the comments, which moment do you think put the detective at the greatest risk?